How's Angela in the housing market?
Very, very good. Very,
Yeah.
very good. But we are now beginning to see, I think, where solicitors are really, really overworked. And then you've got some estate agents putting chains together, not really looking at timescales. They're now beginning to think, shall I continue with this or shall I put it off for another year? But the stamp duty is keeping them together, but by a thin thread, sometimes.
Right.
So, you know, I think we're going to see some sales start to fall, but they're certainly going in at the front end.
Do you think it's going to be a cliff edge like back to the Nigel Lawson era when he changed the rules on the properties and then suddenly the property market just dived once the rules changed?
No, to be honest, people always need to move. So we might not have the quantity, but I think we'll still have the quality of sales that go through. I think that what will affect agents is really greed and their perception of things. But no, I think we will be fine. It will ease off. It's already changed slightly. Well, it changed about a month or so ago. But there's signs that it's beginning to come back again. It's very, you're watching it weekly at the moment, and you can see different trends, and you can see different price ranges that are going through, and others that nobody's interested in, but for no good reason. It's just the market doesn't really seem to be there.
Right.
I've been speaking with some mortgage advisors about Boris and his 95% mortgages. But to be honest, although as you know, Mike, I'm not a numbers person, but I feel the Help to Buy, something like that for first-time buyers on the second-hand market would be more useful, because at the moment, the only people who seem to be creaming it are the builders. And it's meaning where our investors seem to have dropped off a bit, and our first-time buyers, where they've had to increase their deposit, they're being steered more towards the Help to Buy, and that's the new builds.
Okay. That's interesting. We're seeing a new phenomenon that banks are turning away startups. So the established banks are not interested in startups anymore. Yeah. So go away. We're not interested. And if you're small, again, they're not interested. So these new challenger banks, as they call them, Starlings and Tides and all the rest of it, are coming to their own. But of course, it's a question of them trying to get funds. You know, it's all right getting a bank because it's taking sort of 3 months plus to actually just get a bank account open. It really is crazy out there, and the banks are so inefficient. And I mean, we're all having to work from home, but it really is a nonsense that the banks are just so ineffective to open up a bank account. They make all sorts of excuses, but in the reality, they're not interested.
Yeah, I've heard it on the good authority that one of the major banks is going to start offering their clients £1,250 to move over to one of the challenger banks. They'll take them on because the banks don't want. They're worried about the debt that's going to be caused from like the bounce back loans, even though the government is guaranteeing the 80%, the onus is on them to collect. So
right.
Their concerns, they are thinking now that it will come that they'll start paying accounts that they don't want, 1,250 to go.
They've already started.
Okay.
Yeah, I run a local Explorer Scout unit and we have a bank account with NatWest. Yeah. And I had a letter last week saying on the U-Switch or the switching bank accounts, and we can go to either the Co-op or Metro Bank and they will give us £1,250.
Yeah, NatWest was the forerunner, and they reckon the other four will follow through as well now. Yeah.
So I'm obviously in the process of trying to get permission from the Scout people locally so that I can move it in there. I mean, we're looking at moving to Lloyd's anyway, but I've said, well, can I go to Metro Bank first, please?
Yeah, I think the agreement has been that it'll be Metro, Starling, Deutsche Bank. I can't remember the other one, but there's 5 of them that will be where you can move into.
Yeah, not all of them are offering the money though. you get a link, and when you click on the link, it'll tell you what each bank is offering. And for us, it was the Co-op and Metro Bank that you would get £1,250 for.
Nice to feel wanted, isn't it?
I know.
To move.
Yeah.
That's where we need that's where we need the whole I don't know, people like Ian Woodward on here to tell us what they're being told unofficially, because I've had to use Ian recently because the NatWest team was so long, and he's really good at shaking the tree sometimes. And so we suddenly got some action because he went and just called up people in the centre somewhere and saying, what on earth is going on? Because I think they just become complacent, and they're because you can't go into the branch, they're just hopeless. So, you know, Ian was one of the first guys who told me about this, what the banks are calling the Halloween horror show. And we just have to hope that it's not going to be as bad. I just think funds are going to be difficult to get hold of, even though there's loads of money out there. I think funds traditionally from your user bank are going to be really hard to get hold of. So,
Mike, can I ask, it's a very, very good debate this, and I've sent you a message about maybe doing more with it. And with the brains in this boardroom, how would we advise people who fall into that category of a risk to the bank that the banks are trying to move away from? You know, what actions can they take to offset fallout from obviously the furlough scheme going and all the worries over the next 6-12 months? And so it's great to hear what the banks are doing and what we're concerned about and what we're hearing from our clients, but also there's a massive brain power here where, you know, we're not necessarily advising professionally, so that would have to be carefully positioned. But equally, we know enough that we could really give value to somebody who doesn't even know that they're about to fall over a cliff in some way or another.
Well, there's an awful lot of people don't know, because what they've some have done is, for example, taken loans and hope that it's going to be enough.
Well, my hairdresser was told, take whatever the government are saying, because the government know that people won't be able to pay it. They'll have no businesses to sell, so they'll write the loans off. And so that she said, she and others have been encouraged to take whatever you can, because they won't be able to grab the money back from you anyway.
Well, effectively, these bounce back loans are like that. I mean, there's a whole load of fraudulent applications. Among our client base, we're only aware of 2 that we think are dodgy. But there are a whole load that have been made quite fraudulently, and the banks knew that because you only had to answer 5 questions. So, and it's there's the 50,000s are just, it's almost like putting money out into the system. So, and of course, anyway, it looks like we've stopped people. We've got a whole load of no-shows. So obviously, the sunrise on the beach has been proved to be more attractive than our session today. So, actually, what you're saying, Sarah, that's why I wanted to run this session, because it's a really back to basics session, some of which we've heard before. But we've, as a firm, have invested in new software where we're looking, especially where people have got cloud accounting, where we're analysing in an awful lot more detail. But whereas before we would do it, but it would take a lot of time, we're now using software to interrogate, and it's and I thought, when I'm looking to see what we're doing, is how many businesses are actually doing this for themselves and actually looking at the basics. So I thought it's time we revisited the basics. So financing is just one of the areas, but when when we talk in terms of strategy or the difference between strategy and tactics, there's just a need for clarity of thinking sometimes, and I'm very conscious of when we look at what Michael Geetson's doing. I don't know if any of you have been following at Identity. So there's a business that has grown rapidly and started. They started being a marketing agency. They were doing exhibitions. They were doing events. Then, he came and talked to us about how, for example, they got business with Apple by being innovative and exceeding expectations, producing stuff with their skill sets, their carpenters, to produce really exciting boxes and gizmos just to prove their skills, and using small things like that to wow big business, and using that as a Trojan horse then to get bigger contracts. And suddenly, the events business has just fallen off a cliff. And so what's he done? Well, he's, as he describes it, he's pivoted and realised that he's accumulated so much talent in his business and grown. And he's and recognised as one of the fastest growing businesses in the Sunday Times top 100 list. So he's now become a online and is actively using the power of social media, particularly LinkedIn, to re-establish his brand as an online events agency. So he's still going to be able to do events when they're doing it, but he started picking up stuff like, so he helped NATO have organise their meeting when NATO came to this country. So he's got into the government sector, but he's sort of said, right, okay, what can I do? I can either curl up and die, or I can look about the market and where it's going to go in the immediate, say, next 12 months, next 24 months, knowing that I still got the skill set when people can start meeting together face to face. I can resume doing that, but in the meantime, I've still got to keep going. And just reading his bit on LinkedIn yesterday, he's actually achieved a similar sort of turnover. Maybe not achieved the growth that he had anticipated, but he's still achieving the turnover. So he's actually meeting demand, because people are still putting on events for international companies. So they're still having to put on events. They're having to have conferences, but they have to be all managed online. And so rather than just having Zoom calls like this, they have to have obviously far more sophisticated functions. And the conferences, I just was attending one the other day. It was a weeks-long conference, and there's all sorts of platforms that are developing now that are really quite sophisticated. So all that said to me is, just somebody in our own midst, one of our own colleagues is actually changing the way he's doing, rather than actually coding. He's actually looking to do things differently, and I think we've got to learn from that. So I'm going to hope to try and get Mike, see if he can spare some time, maybe even next month, to come in and share what he's doing with us, and just have it as a discussion point, because I think we've all got to learn from each other. So as Sarah says, we're all in business, and sometimes the obvious can be staring us in the face. And one of the people who was meant to be attending here today is one of my London clients who's also in the hospitality world. And luckily he's been a very successful business, but he's having to do exactly the same, to pivot the business to decide where does he go from here. So I think it's a shame that he hasn't made it. So there's obviously something's come up there, because any new ideas. The guy went to Cranley Business School to learn from various people to get ideas, and but interestingly enough, he loves to be challenged, and so we will have a weekly catch-up conversation, and it's just possibility thinking, and so. I love it when he sort of says, well, it's great because you don't talk like an accountant. You're talking, you're actually trying to get underneath the skin of business, which is exactly what we're trying to do today. So with that, let me just start. I'm going to share my screen, and we'll get on with what we're trying to discuss, and trying to cut in, please, at any time. So what I want to do is just revisit the story of Ben-Hur. Now, many of you will have heard this story, but I still use it. Nadine and I took a week off the other day down in the West Country, and I had to do a presentation midweek for a group, and I used this story, and I thought, well, I'll use it again, because the way I talk about it in conferences is I talk about when I'm watching old films like Ben-Hur. Quite often you sort of drift off and think about other things. And when I was watching Ben-Hur, many years ago, I was watching Charlton Heston there as a slave. His boyhood friend is the soldier on the right-hand side, who became a Roman soldier. So they were great friends. But as they became adults, Charlton Heston became a slave, and his Italian friend became a Roman officer. So the Roman officer had to look after all the slaves rowing on the ship, and as they were cast out to sea. I was thinking about this as a business. So you've got your slaves who are mirroring the workers typical workers in a business. You've got your soldiers, your Roman soldiers. You've got a guy beating the drum, beating the pace. So bang, bang, bang. So as the rowers are rowing to the base of the drum. And you've got the managers, the Roman soldiers, who are whipping the slaves, trying to get them to row faster, to row in time, to produce more productivity. And as the fleet get out to sea, what happens is some of the slaves just aren't as fit as other slaves, and occasionally they die. So what they do is they unmanacle them, throw them overboard, and go down below and find some more slaves, so that the pace of the ship doesn't slacken at all. But after a while, out at sea, they run out of slaves to replace. And so what do? So the owners who are sitting there on the steering wheel, on the tiller, supping their wine as they do, looking at trying to direct where they're going, they've got an awkward decision to make. So you've got a gap. So one of the oars is unmanned. What would they do? Well, like a typical business, they would probably ask their manager, one of their junior managers, to take the place on one of the oars so that they can keep moving. So one of the soldiers stops whipping and gets onto the oars and starts rowing. Of course, as more slaves die, the more soldiers are then moved onto the oars, until there's no more soldiers other than the one man beating the drum. So what do? The owners are faced with a really difficult situation. Do we sit here steering the ship, or do we get down there and start rowing? Well, what would a typical business do? Well, of course, the way they've been brought up, grandmother has always taught them, roll up your sleeves, do a hard day's work, and you'll get a fair day's pay. That's the way life works. Of course, we know differently. It's not about the donkey strategy where you have to keep working hard and hard and harder, but that's the way we've been brought up. So what the owner does, sets his direction, looks ahead, sets the rudder, and then goes down and takes a spare oar and carries on rowing. And from time to time, we'll come up and say, "Oh gosh, we've gone off direction. So let's adjust the rudder, set the new direction." And for every sort of half hour, they come up and adjust themselves. When they start coming close to land, they see a port, and they manage just to avoid the rocks, and they get into port. And like all good business people, at the end of a project, they do a review, and they realise they've got to the wrong port, but they've got there safely. So they look at what their journey had told them. Well, so they weren't sure, because what they did was natural. They had to keep rowing hard, but they'd actually, in trying to row faster, they'd put their ship into danger, and then it actually ended up at a different destination to where they'd intended to go. So they called for Super Mike. Now, remember, at that time I was dreaming, so I'm allowed to feature in any dream. So they called for Super Mike. So Super Mike came along and listened to the story. And Super Mike said, it's a typical of so many projects. The trouble is, you're not measuring what matters. What you're doing is focusing on activity rather than what you're trying to achieve. So we've all been taught, always start with the end in mind, and never lose sight of where you're going. But where you always focus on measuring activity, what you do is you lose sight of where your end game is going to be, and sometimes you will lose direction. You've been very lucky because you came into port, albeit the wrong port, but you missed the rocks coming in. So you've actually achieved safety, but that was more by luck than by chance. So what I was explaining to them is the basics of business that we must all remember, because I still see amongst businesses this tendency to measure activity all the time. And activity is fine. Billing is one of the key activities. So you focus on your billing, you focus on getting more efficiency out of your team. You're focusing on all the different areas of activity, and yet sometimes that's not what's relevant at the moment. So I started with the story of Michael Geetson and identity, where he started with saying it's no good just carrying on doing the same stuff, because if there's not enough demand for it, I've got to produce something differently. So his end goal has changed. It might have changed temporarily, or it might have produced a totally new market that he's going to be able to service. And when his old market returns, he'll be able to do both. So his fastest growing company might well be something that will continue to happen, because what he's done is embraced a new end goal. So let me remind you about this straight road. This is a picture I took in Canada. And if we were to think about living our life on purpose and measuring what matters in our business, we have to decide where our goals are. What are we trying to achieve? And this is something, this is basic stuff, but although it's basic stuff, I'm sure you won't be surprised. You might be surprised that when I ask people, well, what's your goal? Very few people can tell me. Very few people can tell me, because the goal has actually deteriorated into being better than yesterday. And we have to change the way we think, because yesterday is irrelevant. Tomorrow, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. So we have to now look at our businesses and actually think about, right, what matters now in the new world that we're living, with the new circumstances, with clients now getting used to and customers getting used to online buying, online visits where they didn't before. Technology has been forced on them, now getting used to technology. So what matters in our business? What do we have to do differently? So we have to make sure that we understand and have a clearly understood goal, make sure our team clearly understand, so that we can then decide what matters in our business, so we can measure what matters. It really is important, and I can't emphasize it enough. To illustrate, here's a simple little spreadsheet that sometimes I use with clients who want to engage with the goals question. So I said, look, your goals is not just your business. Your goals is your life. Tell me where your business fits into your life. So tell me what you want to achieve, both in your business goals, your personal goals in terms of financial wealth, your family goals, and your personal time. Because most of us, me included, and I'm now almost worse than ever, working to silly o'clock, and the personal time becomes so precious. The week away in the West Country was just so fantastic to recharge the batteries, to actually get some quality sleep, that it just puts life into perspective. And so what we have to do in looking at our businesses, we have to appraise what we're thinking about. We have to appraise our action plan. But rather than just getting stuck into the how, we need to actually define our what carefully. So, again, thinking about Michael Geetson, has he actually thought how many factories he's going to have? Is he quite happy with his factory in West Ham? I'm sure he is. I'm sure he's not, as an accountant in trained and becoming a businessman, he knows he doesn't want to actually increase his overheads anymore, but he's invested in talent. So he's actually identifying what are the issues that he wants. So he knows his targets in terms of his sales value, the number of clients, how he's going to do it, and all the rewards that he's going to create. But particularly important, he's going to, as an entrepreneur, he's going to be focused on the value of his business. And is what he is doing going to make his business more valuable? Because any entrepreneur, other than somebody who's just doing it for a lifestyle, is looking at the value of their business, because their business should always be up for sale. So we need to think about that. And if anybody wants a copy of this, I'll share it with you happily. So just let us know. But this is just a way just to get people to think and to think differently. So coming back to our duck on our straight road. So we're talking about planning. Does our thinking need to change? So we were talking with Angela earlier on and saying, right, with the property market, what happens if the property market crashes over the cliff and suddenly dies? As Angela says, people will still want to move. But do we have to do differently? Well, Angela will tell you one of the things that we discussed very early on when Angela came for advice was we need to make sure as a new business that Angela didn't go and spend a load of money on fixed overheads. that she could be more agile and more flexible, so that if something happened to the market, she would actually be able to be much more flexible, and I'm sure that will pay off. So thinking about our business, first we have to define our what. So if we go back to that sheet I just showed you, what is it we're trying to achieve? And the bigger the business, the harder this is, because we've got to think in terms of our team. So all our teams in our different departments, what are they trying to do? What are their goals? Because they're like mini businesses within the business. What are they trying to achieve? Do they actually know what they're trying to achieve? And then we just got to ask ourselves why. Why is that a goal that matters? Because sometimes I see people chasing a what that to me is very dubious. It's a what that's been decided based on the past, rather than what might be sensible in the future. So it's really important that we ask ourselves why, and maybe get somebody from the outside to challenge your why. Only then, if you've satisfied your why and your team understand your why, then you can get stuck into the how. I find in business, most people are in the how before they've even decided their what, and they've never asked themselves why. It's something that's been put in their head. They thought it was a good idea. The number of people in the last recession who opened up pet shops because they got redundancy, they had some money to spend, so they think, oh, I love pets, so I'll open up a pet shop. And they were bankrupt within 6 months because they didn't realise how much it would cost to set up a pet shop, and the investment in stock, etc. It's just something that was passion. They just had not even taken advice. It was just an impulse. They had money that they'd never had in their pocket because they'd taken a redundancy payout, and then they wasted it by investing in something that just happened to be a passion. But they weren't business people, and they hadn't taken advice because they didn't want to spend the money to take the advice. They were just stuck into the how of what they enjoyed doing. So if you've actually got your what, you've actually proved your why, it's validated, you then stuck into the how, that's where you go along this straight road and you start measuring your how. The who is going to do it, where is it going to be done, and by when. So if our goal is at the top of the mountain up here, or it could be this one over here, whichever it is, we've got to decide. Now, we could either go along the straight road, or we could take a turning off. But all along here, we have posts that are going to give us measurements, so we can just assume that if we want to be there by, let's say, the end of the year, then we can work backwards and start saying, well, in order to be able to get there by the end of the year, we need to be able to get to there within a certain time and to there within a certain time. And then do we go straight up, or do we go round and come up the back? Whichever way we're going to do it, we've got to think about it, and we've got to set in milestones against which we can compare ourselves. So we have to define what those milestones are. What matters in our business? It's not just the speed that we get there. It is the direction we get there. What matters to our clients? What matters to our suppliers? What matters to our financiers? What matters to our stakeholders? What are the different things that matter, that are important in our business? So I say no apologies, getting stuck into the nuts and bolts. If you don't do this, you're like this duck on this river. And again, many of you have seen this, there's what I call the Zambezi principle, a throwback to my time in Africa. But this duck comes off the straight road, is blown onto a river because it has no steering mechanism. It's got no brakes, it's got no way of directing itself, and it's got no way of steering itself. So wherever the wind takes it, wherever the currents of life take it, it reacts. And it'll say, well, just like so many businesses, it will decide and react depending on the circumstances they find themselves in, rather than actually deciding where it wants to go and making sure that they find a way of fitting some brakes, fitting a rudder, fitting some way of being able to adjust the speed that you travel. This one has nothing. So if it's lucky, it will end up in quiet water and end up in safety. But just further along, you see the flowing white water, which represents excitement, which represents thrills, It represents speed. And of course, danger. Now, that's what I call about people who've invest in, they take a risk, they borrow an awful lot of money, they take increase their fixed overheads, so they have a lack of flexibility, a lack of agility. And it's really exciting when they put some of that money into a fast car, into plush offices, and they end up being caught, swept away on the exciting current of life. And sometimes that current of life means that, in this case, the River Zambezi, you plunge over Victoria Falls. And that normally means death, unless Super Mike's there on the other side to rescue you. Now, we're having a session now just to allow us to contemplate our businesses so that we don't ever need to think about Super Mike coming to rescue. So the whole point about this session is, what are the results we should measure? What is relevant in our business? And each of our businesses is going to be different. It depends whether we've got repeat customers. It depends whether we just only got one-off. Are there some things that we sell that we could add new things that we could sell to existing customers where they bought one thing but they're not likely to buy that one thing again? What are the ways that we can increase our business? Again, going back to Michael Geetson, he's saying, well, there's only going to be a limit to the number of exhibitions now, where not many people are going to be able to invest, unless they're massive, into exhibitions. But what they're going to do is they're going to have online exhibitions. So how can we help them have online exhibitions? So he's produced a completely new product to do it. So what are the results? So he just parked what he's measuring in to the side, and he's now looking at measuring different results. So what are the results you would measure? So I just want us now, before we think about the normal results, is just to remind you of, again, we talked about this before, underlying success drivers. When I say underlying success drivers, what is it about you that makes people want to deal with you rather than anybody else? Is it the quality of your product, your service? Is it the personality of your service? What is it that is so special about your business? And if it is that special, what is it that's so crucial? How do you measure it? And I always use the example, because it's a real life example of an Eastbourne company that keeps growing. And I said, I just don't understand, this is so much, could be such a commodity business, but you are growing, and I need to understand, what is it that's special about you? And they said, it's our speed of turnaround. So I said, okay. And so this Eastbourne business, speed of turnaround. So tell me, what is your speed of turnaround? Well, we've probably turned around our orders in just under a day. Okay. So how have you improved since over the last year? Well, we've probably still doing it in just under a day, but we're faster than our competitors. All right. And so how are you measuring that? And they weren't. So they've defined that the key underlying success driver for them is nothing about their product, because there were loads of similar products out there. But the one thing that differentiated them was their speed of turnaround of the order, and they weren't measuring it. So I said, so if you were on holiday or you were ill, how would your team know if they're drifting off the measures that mattered to you? So they looked at it and thought, well, we won't be off. So they actually quite complacent, but they're still growing. So they're no longer a client. They didn't like the direct questioning that I did, but it's just interesting that they have grown, but they just didn't measure what they said was the fundamental importance. Now, sometimes that underlying success driver is not financial. So like the speed of turnaround, you just have to find a way of measuring. So what is it? So, for example, if we looked at Angela, it's not Angela's speed of turnaround is dependent on lawyers. It's dependent on estate. It's depending on the length of the chain. But still, people will use Angela. Why is it that people would use Angela? Angela, what would you say is the reason that you think people are using you?
Trust. I find that only taking on 10 properties at a time, giving the continuity of they know it's me that walks through the door with the viewers, me that does the valuation, that I found has really been a success.
Okay.
So I think it's the trust and the continuity that's bringing them back.
Okay, so that's hard to measure, but okay, if that's the main reason. Martin, what would you say about you, say in terms of marketing? There's loads of marketeers out there, yet you continue to attract people to use you. What would you say differentiates you?
I think with us, it's the fact that we offer a complete service, in that we're most people's outsourced marketing team. And the way that we only recently started billing ourselves is that we don't have any particular specialism. It sounds like jack of all trades, doesn't it? But because we've got a lot of people, each with their own skill set, we don't have a particular type of marketing to promote. So we're not saying you've got to use social media. We're not just saying you've got to use online, etc. So because of that, we can offer a very impartial set of advice. Yeah.
And so have you thought in terms of, are there any particular areas that you would measure that other than just new clients? Because if you're saying, well, what is it that is different about us that's underlying our underlying success?
Yeah, we do measure the success of our clients, but as you know, we're not very good at marketing ourselves.
Right.
Although we have got a new website and everything in development at the moment, so we probably should run those metrics as well for ourselves. But yeah, apart from the how much are we earning each month is not too sophisticated, actually.
Yeah, it's difficult. That's why I'm saying this. It is difficult. It's not a something that naturally comes, and it might be. It's a combination of things. So, remember we talked about the Continental Airlines. So Gordon Bethune. So he wrote this old book, From Worst to First, behind the scenes of Continental's remarkable comeback. He joined them from Boeing. So remember, he decided there were 3 things that he needed to measure that would influence his results. And those 3 things, so if you were running an airline, what are those 3 things that can anybody remember what are the 3 things that are most important in our minds? And safety, obviously, we want to make sure that we arrive safely. But what are the 3 other things that we would worry about most?
Numbers of passengers.
Yeah, now I suppose numbers of passengers, but how close we're going to be to other passengers, but that wasn't relevant there. But yeah, okay.
Airlines only are earning money when they're in the air, so possible turnaround time.
Yeah, so that matters to them. But what matters to the passenger, the customer?
Punctuality.
Punctuality, absolutely.
Service.
What is the thing you really fear the most if you go away? What the thing you dread happening to you?
Losing your luggage.
Perfect.
Dying.
Yeah, dying we assume is granted, but yeah, on-time arrival, punctuality, lost luggage, and customer complaints as a result of service. So he focused on those 3 areas. What are leading indicators? So if you deal with those, your lagging indicators, in other words, your sales, will improve because people will talk about you. And Continental had a terrible reputation. They were the worst performing airline, and they became the best performing airline just by focusing on that. So think about your business and think, well, what are the leading indicators in your business and underlying success drivers that are going to affect your end results? So non-financial drivers could be your innovation and creativity. It could be your investment in training that allows you to innovate. Investment in systems. So the fact that you become more effective, you're more consistent, more reliable, so that you stop being an OXO business and you become an XOX business. Let me remind you about OXO business. Anybody remember what an OXO business is?
No.
It's the business that has ordinary systems and therefore needs to employ extraordinary people yet only produces ordinary results. Yet the XOX business that we should all aspire to be are the ones that have got extraordinary systems. We only need to employ, open inverted commas, ordinary people, so less expensive people, and yet we still produce extraordinary results. So the investment in systems, in trying to make sure that we are more consistent, more reliable, and more efficient. And then our investment in our customers. So I always use the story, which again, another old story, but still very relevant, the moments of truth. Jan Carlson, who turned around Scandinavian Airlines 30 years ago, and he wrote the book about moments of truth, and he's the one who said, if people walk on my plane, pull down the meal tray and find a coffee stain, what must the state of our engines be? So totally unconnected, but very relevant. And so every moment of contact was a moment of truth. So he's the guy who said, I want to get my team to find 100 areas where we can get a 1% improvement. And if we can get that 1% improvement, after we've achieved that 1% improvement in 100 areas, we'll go for another 1% improvement, because those 1% will go ka-ching straight to our bottom line. But more importantly, if as many of those 100 areas are moments of contact with our customers, they are going to talk about us, and they are going to help us to be really successful. So, if you haven't read this book, it's a very easy book to read, and it's so valid to all of us that we should be aware of it. Especially now, because we are having less face-to-face contact. I say that advisedly because Russ, who's on the call with Colburn and Wingrove, Russ is still obviously, as a builder, is having face-to-face contact, and what they've been producing has been some amazing transformations in people's houses. And those are moments of truth where you need to capture it, and then sort of capture the gushing praise and the joy in people's faces, rather than just pictures. Because Judy captures some fantastic pictures. So with the moments of truth in dealing with businesses, and I think every time you get a moment of truth, when it's going well, you need to be able to capture that and sort of think about it. So, Russ is at the moment one of those strange businesses there is still very much face-to-face contact on there. But Russ won't mind me saying, because with face-to-face contact, sometimes they don't always work. And one customer said, I don't like the look of that person. And Russ just said straight away, okay, we'll change it. So it's the way he responded, without questioning, without defending, just said straight away, that's fine. You're the boss. You're the one that matters. However unreasonable the comment was, Russ dealt with it. And I know the customers very well, so very tricky customers. And they're now really good friends, delighted customers who will become an advocate for Colburn and Wingrove. So well done, Russ. Okay, so if we've got our underlying success driver, measuring what matters, let me remind you about this idea of the one-page plan. So we all think in terms of measuring what matters according to our sets of accounts, but I think we should do it differently. I think we should think about our one-page plan idea. So think about our long straight road, think about our mountains, think about our goals. What are we trying to achieve? Start with the end in mind and work backwards. Don't look last year and work forwards. A 5% on improvement on mediocrity, if we had a mediocre year last year, is nothing. That's no good. If we've got to decide what we need to be able to survive, what we need to have a stronger balance sheet, what we need to create wealth in our business, we have to identify that and then work backwards and then ask ourselves the relevant questions to be able to allow us to achieve that. It's common sense, but I'm afraid common sense is not always commonly practiced. So identify our underlying success drivers and then go into our sales drivers, our cost and cash drivers. And if we measure those, the ones that matter, our results are what come at the end. We were talking earlier about leading indicators and lagging indicators. So Gordon Batoon with Continental, he didn't measure his sales. He measured his on-time arrival, the number of incidences of lost luggage and the number of customer complaints. And he said, if I can measure that 6 months later, my key results will improve. If he just measured his sales, he said, well, I can't do anything about it because the problems that caused this drop in sales happened 6 months ago. So we weren't able to do anything about it. So you really got to measure what matters. So these are the typical plan, one-page plan, where in this particular case, the underlying success driver is customer delight. So you set your targets, you set your actual, but you could measure these quarterly. So you could measure them monthly. It doesn't have to be one particular area. So you could have a series of underlying success drivers which you work on. So we have to decide what is it that's important rather than just keeping on the old treadmill like a hamster. So I hope that makes sense, but just think about cost and cash drivers as we get into the nitty gritty. Most businesses identify their costs, but do not spend enough time differentiating between fixed costs that they can do nothing about, activity costs that are influenced, sales have a bearing on it, and the direct costs. So one of the things, I've just taken on a new client that really is going to be fantastically successful despite the climate at the moment. They're in high value wood, not wood buildings, but things that things like pergolas, porches, outside gazebos, were really high quality and are doing really well. But what I found that they were not doing is their figures made no sense at all. They weren't measuring their sales with the relevant costs. And we found that there were a whole load of deposits coming in that were being treated as sales, but there was money in advance. So they were not only paying tax in advance, but I was not able to monitor their margins properly, so they hadn't got a clue. And they said, well, we should be making about 40%. But it was up and down like a yo-yo, and no wonder, because the money coming in was all treated as sales. So one of the things we did is said, right, first thing we do is treat everything as a project. And so what we'll do is we'll encapsulate. So imagine in an envelope, if you're thinking all your money coming in and all your costs, so you have your budget for your project, and that's on your outside of your envelope. Right, as we get the costs of the raw materials coming in, let's gather them and compare to our budget, and we make sure that the relevant costs of performing that project is also matched, and then we'll get a true figure. And so we're actually measuring our directly variable costs with our directly variable income. So we have to make sure that we another. So many businesses don't even think about it. It just happens. They put the figures into the computer and they look at what's produced at the end, if they look at it, because so many will measure their success just by what's in their bank account. And if they've got a good bank account, the fact that they haven't paid their suppliers, and that's one of the reasons why they've got a good bank account, that doesn't matter to them, because that's the way they measure it. It's just they're not measuring the right things that matter. So direct costs are really important. And I always say turn them into ratios, because that becomes more relevant. It's easier to manage trends rather than absolute figures. So you can compare yourself to other people in your industry, competitors, compare yourself to previous periods, set yourself goals for future periods. And I always say, talk about your non-financial drivers and just think in terms of what are the issues that could be holding you back. So some of these could be underlying success drivers. So I won't dwell on that. That's for a different session that we do, but it's just thinking about what are the areas that we could be focusing on. The examples of waste, basically. They're profit robbers that are not necessarily measured because you're not identifying your listening skills, your selling skills, your communication skills. Okay. Anybody tell me the biggest cost in business? Again, revisiting it.
Wages.
That's a normal answer. Come on, loads of you have been on this one before.
IT and computers, software costs.
Yeah, no.
I would say biggest cost and mistakes.
Yeah, even more fundamental than that.
People.
Lack of money.
Okay, let me show you. This is just an example. Typical set of accounts. You show your sales, you have your costs, and you get a profit. What it doesn't show you is what your sales should have been, because we allow ourselves, and we certainly allow our team we're so frightened of losing the business that we end up underselling ourselves, and we don't measure that. So the biggest cost in every business, the biggest profit robber that I come across in most businesses now more than ever, and that's why I wanted to share this with you, is discounts. So discounts is not allowed in my vocabulary. Discounts is a swear word. You should never ever give anybody a discount. By all means, give them a special price, but never ever give them a discount. Once you give them a discount, you always have to give them a discount. So your price should be 3 million. If you happen to say to somebody, I'll let you have it at 2 million, but what can you do for me? I'll give you that as a special price, then that's fine. But what you're doing is giving it a special price. It could be a launch price. It could be a quantity negotiation because you're getting more, but it's never going to be a discount because you don't give discounts. Your price is what it's priced. Did you know, I didn't know, Louis Vuitton, they never give a discount and they will never do a sale. They will destroy their handbags rather than sell them at underprice. They're so determined to maintain the value, the perceived value of their brand. So it really is important. And this is what I'm now seeing with so many clients. We're seeing that people have lost confidence in their ability to justify their price. And so they give away, rather than lose business, they give away what they're producing. And so if you do that too often, what you're doing is predicting your death. You're not predicting the time of your death, but you're predicting your death. So you need to look at that. And just remember, look at this matrix. And again, you have a copy of this if you haven't got one. So many businesses have got a 30% gross profit percentage. It's typical third in terms of direct costs, a third in terms of overheads, a third in terms of profit. It's a quite typical scenario. If you were going to give a 5% discount, your sales have got to be increased by 20% to be no worse off. If you're giving a 10% discount, your sales have got to be increased by a half to be no worse off. And if you give a 15% discount, which is not unheard of, your sales need to double to be no worse off. So in that sort of circumstance, I've only had one person who has said, right, we've had sales, and our sales when we give our 10% discount, our sales will increase by 50%. I said, great. If it works, then you can justify it. But be careful not to compromise your brand, because if you are allowing your product to be seen that cheap compared to your competitors, you are in danger of compromising your brand. So far better to do something to your perceived offering and actually put your price up by 5%, or let's say 10%. Your sales have to reduce by 25%. So you've got to lose a quarter of your customers if you put your prices up by 10%. Is that likely to happen? Not really. Or if it is, there's something seriously wrong in your business. So the challenge is, can you put your prices up by 10%? And that goes straight to the bottom line because it's not incurring any extra cost in doing so. And even if you lost 10% of your customers, you're still going to be better off. Most people don't look at that. They go straight down here. It really is dangerous. And it's something that we all need to be very careful. We have to think about value and how do we actually put across the value that we give to our customers in moving forward.
I suppose, Mike, some cases, some businesses do things that they don't earn any revenue on until they've got the sale. And therefore the temptation is to get the sale at any price because I've already spent the money getting to that point.
Yeah, I understand that. I don't say that, I don't say it in a condescending way. I do understand, but the trouble is, if we allow ourselves to become commodities in inverted commas, where the only way we differentiate ourselves is on price, there will always going to be somebody who's going to come in cheaper, who've got a death wish stronger than ours.
Yeah.
So we just have to realise if we've got a death wish, carry on doing that. So that's why I say discounts is a swear word. It doesn't exist in my vocabulary.
I think as well, Mike, if you're giving a discount, you're undervaluing the work that you're providing, and your employees are then not feeling valued. So will the quality of work on those discounted jobs actually be at the quality that you want?
Absolutely, I agree.
And that will then have a knock-on effect on your overall results.
Absolutely, I agree, and I think it's really important to understand that. It's just so easy for us to get trapped into that. So let's just think about the sales drivers, and then I'll just show you some of the things we're doing. So the sales drivers, again, like I was saying to you about our new client that's going to be really successful. What we need to identify is this sort of information. We don't want to know just about sales. We want to know what the sales are made up of. So we need to know the number of customers. We need to know how often those customers are buying. And we need to know how much they're spending on their transaction with us. So we need to monitor if that is ever changing, because that's a lead indicator. Because if the amount they're spending with us by transaction might be an indication of they don't think that we're offering the value that we think we're offering. So we've also got to measure our marketing, our lead generation, our ability to convert those leads, to actually create them into customers in the first time, and then having got them, how good are we at keeping them? How good are we in terms of our customer care and our customer delight to make sure that those clients don't leave us? So how much they spend with us on a transaction just depends on our price and the quantity they buy and the number of times they buy is the relation between the two. Very few businesses I see will measure that. They've got that information, but because the software they use doesn't actually give that information, they don't measure it, and it's too much of a fag to measure it themselves. But it's really important. So let me show you the sort of things that is possible that we've started to do. So I'll stop sharing that, and I'll just share with you another. Right. Right, so if I share with you this screen I've got here, what we've invested in is software that will actually analyze this. And I'm not saying this from a boasting point of view, but it's because we're actually walking our talk. We're doing exactly the same as I'm talking to you about doing, is we're looking to be able to do more, but we realize that it's not going to be effective if we're just going to have adopt the donkey strategy and get our team to actually go in and rip out the stuff from their client's software and look at the information. So what we're doing is we're getting interrogation software that actually will now break down the information. This is just a demo company that we're showing, where you're looking at, this is like a May 2019 year end. So it's producing analysis in terms of traditional figures, sales. The month of May, last quarter, what increase? 10.6% down year on year compared to last May. Last quarter, 7% up on year, and the last 12 months, 0.2% down. Then it looks at gross margin. Now, this is stuff that you could normally do on any stuff, but it will break it down and divide the margin each month. So what? Then it looks at overheads and will produce the information. So that can all be done by what finance is already, and then we produce a net profit. So the net profit is 10.7k up in the month of May, on the quarter, 37.9k up, 626.8% up compared to the previous last quarter, and the overall profit 79.9k up and 32.8% up year on year. So looking at ratios, analysing the different quarters and looking at the performance, and then looking at the value of the business, the value to the shareholders. But far more importantly, this is what it's now starting to give to us. So what we're talking about is saying, right, let's look at those sales drivers. So total sales, when we look at that, 1,001k, so 1 million. Let's actually look how that's made up of. So in the previous 12 months, the number of transactions were 4,141. In the last 12 months, it's gone up to 4,360. So that's a tick, a positive variance. There's a 50,000 increase due to the number of transactions. The average value per transaction has actually reduced from 0.24k, £240 to £230. So although we actually had an increase in value of 50.3k by increase in number of transactions, because we're charging less, it's been wiped out by that 1 point reduction in price. Then we look at the customer drivers and we actually interrogate how many customers have actually been set up. Now, obviously, if the software say I was analysing your software, if you just post sales and you don't put all your invoices down there that you post to your customers, the software I use now actually goes and looks at the number of invoices that you're posting to your customers and the number of times you're actually raising an invoice, so that each time is a transaction. And so it'll also look at the number of new customers that are set up on your ledger. So the number of new customers was 98 the previous 12 months, down to 79. So a downward trend. The existing customers that were there previous year has gone up by 6. The retention rate has gone down from your customers because of the new customers acquired, 55 down to 51. Number of lost customers from the previous year, 92 compared to 73, so an increased trend. So the actual impact, proportion of customers lost, 48.9%. So the impact of this means that we've lost value of 108,000 sales due to 19 fewer customers based on their average transaction value. So this is not just to impress you. What I'm saying is what we're thinking, well, we're talking about how do we measure it, but it's really difficult to do so because the software out there doesn't do it. So what we need to thought, well, we started scouring the market and found out what software is there that will actually do them. So there isn't actually, you do Xero, Sage, QuickBooks, it doesn't give you this information. You still have to delve deep into it. So by using this type of software, we're now able to get the analysis. And so we're looking at the current ratio and debtor days. Take that slightly further, we have a performance analysis that will take that information even deeper. So it says, what worked well, what didn't work well. So cost of sales for your 3 cost lines as a percentage of revenue has decreased. But you've generated 79 new customers over the past 12 months. 19, so that's a reduction in the number of new customers you generated. So 51.1% of your customers last year also bought from you this year, but that's a 4.2% drop on the amounts retained. So what it's doing is analysing the good bits and the bad bits from your figures. And then it just turns it into graphs and breaks down this information in terms of, say, right, our 1 million's revenue, the movement percentage based on transactions. So we've actually got a profit impact of 1,000 less. So why is that? Well, we've got because of transactions, we made 50,000 more because of the number of transactions, but we had 52,000 less because we actually reduced our prices. So the impact of 10,000 profit on gross margin. So we actually got an improved gross margin overall because of the overall figures. The overheads, profit impact 10,000 because there's a drop in the overheads, and it just summarizes. And then we just move on, and it starts going through all the analysis in a lot more detail. So what I'm saying is these are examples of identifying what matters. So if we identify what matters, how do we delve into it? Because it isn't easy. So this is now with artificial intelligence, we're going to see more and more of this. This is effectively using not artificial intelligence, but is using a lot of clever software to actually interrogate. So it goes and produces your customer analysis and produces it graphically. So it's saying, right, how many of your customers are spending money with you? How many compared to the previous year? What are your top 10 customers spending with you? How much of your top 10 customers, what's the reduction in the amount they spend? Because that's a danger sign. So are you actually analysing that sort of information? The statistics is mind-blowing, but if you can actually suddenly get that sort of information, it gives you an ability to actually identify, looking at all your different channels. So what, Michael? So you've got all this clever information. So we've got customer analysis, and we've got, so the same information analysed differently. We've got supplier analysis. What do you do about it? Let me just show you. Share another screen with you. Can you see that business growth model? Does that appear on your screen?
I think we're still looking at what we had before, Mike.
Okay, let me just start share again. Is that yeah?
Yeah.
So your business growth model on your, if you're saying, right, I need to find more clients. I'm going to need to improve my sales, and I'm going to look at my customers. You need to have something that is going to improve your figures. So if we're looking to grow our number of customers, find new customers, get our existing customers, retain our existing customers, and we're looking to try and improve our margins and our net profit, we've got to make various assumptions. So we've got to put growth assumptions. So we've got to put last 12 months, we had a drop in customer acquisition of 19%. Previous 12 months, we had our customer retention was 51.1%. So here's something that where we sit down with our clients, we say, right, okay, what do we need to do? So if we want to improve our customer retention, say by, let's just look to see where our figures are going to be. At the moment, a net profit year 5 is going to be 53.7k. So if we look at our profit there, 53.7k, year 4, 54.6k, year 3, 56.4k, 59.8k. So what can we do differently? Because our profit is reducing if we carry on the way we're doing, because we're losing customers. So how can we reverse that trend? So what you need to do is be able to look at your business and say, well, how about if we improved our customer acquisition, say by 10%? So we're going to go to the marketeers around us and ask them to help us attract more customers. But equally, we've got to improve the number of customers we retain. So here it says, if you currently retain 50% of your customers from one year to the next and want to increase this to 60% in 5 years, enter 2% in the forecast. So it's just an example. Let me see what impact that has. Suddenly, our profit, instead of 57, is 281,000 in year 5. But you'll see a gradual increase just by changing those two variables. By saying we're going to improve our customer acquisition by 10%, and we're going to improve our customer retention by 2%. We could play with average number of transactions the customer spends, average transaction value, look at our gross margin, and look at our overheads. So these are the variables that we need to be looking at in our business. So the point of sharing that with you is just to say we need to think about our business differently. We need to think in terms of what is it that matters in our business, what is relevant, but rather than getting stuck into the how and just getting stuck into the financials, we need to start with the end in mind and go and move backwards. Identify what we think we need to achieve. Get somebody to challenge us, challenge our assumptions, ask ourselves why. Speak to somebody like Chris Hughes, who's been there, done it, and say, why do you think that's the right thing? Let's actually think about make sure we try and minimize the danger to us. So if we're going to have to invest and try new things, what do we have to do differently? Then, having got the why validated, then actually get stuck into the how and identify, so what is it? Underlying success driver? What is the issue that we think is the underlying? Can we measure it? Is it a series of different things that we need to measure? Is it customer delight? Well, how do we measure it? Is it team delight? We just started a new measurement tool called Engagement Multiplier, where it's an online portal. Each quarter, our team are asked to tell us about how they feel. As you can imagine, we've got a team of 30. We've got a variation in views, but we need to hear it. So it's not, we just don't want to have our backs tickled. We want to be told straight, this is what we like that's happening, this is what we don't like. With us, a happy team makes a happy client. If we've got an unhappy team, we'll have unhappy clients. So one of the things we need to measure is our team satisfaction. So that is really important. I don't know if it applies to you. In due course, we'll be sharing that tool with you, but I know Martin, for example, has a measurement tool who I've been looking at that we'll be sharing with you in due course to look at how you have an online tool that clients can assess you regularly, so you can actually actively encourage people rather than actually going to them all the time. Encourage them to give you instant feedback. It's important. A lot of people avoid it because they don't want to know about it, but it's something really important that we measure. So what is it that matters to you? I hope in that sort of run through, and it's gone back to basics, I hope that's sort of given challenge your thinking. And I'm sorry about the number of no-shows that we've had today. That's their loss, but I wanted to share with you sort of some really fundamental stuff there, and where I see the changes, the fact where we're investing, that's only going to change. I think all the people like Xero, QuickBooks, they're all going to Sage, they're all going to have to invest in this type of software to actually give far more detailed analysis than we're currently getting. So,
Mike, can I direct people to a book as well, which is Better Than Before, which is about habits. And, I know from being in your offices years and years ago, you've always been absolutely brilliant about the relationship with the staff. And I can't remember all the headings now, but you would arrive and everybody would put themselves in a category. And if they thought you were a miserable git, they would actually move you from where you had put yourself and move you to the miserable git. And it was great to have that kind of humour, if you like, and engagement, and throwing the balls into the negative positive pot as they leave the building, so that you can gauge roughly what the mood was of the day. And the other thing too is that early picture. I think it was in Canada, and you're talking about the vision, the signposting, and wanting to know the where and the how, and linked to the book Better Than Before, which is about habits. And I think it's in that book, it's a great tool where they talk about, you have the saying of if ... then. So in other words, as you're measuring, you're also scenario planning, you're also thinking of consequences. Often people do all this stuff, but they don't go as far as what are the consequences of. And the if then tool is fantastic. So as you're measuring, if this happens, then we will that. And it really helps to have some of those statements as you're forecasting down with the vision, the where and the how, to then the if then takes the decision away, because you're slowly creating a habit as well. Fantastic book. It's called.
What's the book called?
Better Than Before. I've got it on the bookshelf.
Okay. Well, if you can share that information with me, and that we'll share that with everybody when we follow up. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Any other observations?
I was going to say, the other thing that becomes clear from your demonstration there, Mike, is that, by changing one thing perhaps relatively small,
absolutely,
you can make quite a big difference. And also then that gives you a sort of a hard target to go for. So you could say, right, you've got to get 2% more customers, but that might be 10 customers. So that's suddenly achievable. Whereas you think, oh, where do I go with that? We can't get new customers. Well, I can get 10 because, that's
exactly.
a manageable
It's
number.
so right, Kevin. And that's why when I talked about that 100% improvement in 1% improvement in 100 areas rather than 100% improvement in one area,
yeah.
We could do that. And so sometimes in getting into the brains of our team and our colleagues, we become our own worst enemies, because that little voice on our shoulder, because we don't know, because we haven't actually identified what it means in hard figures, we don't know how many customers. And I once spoke to a firm of lawyers, and a corporate lawyer in that department increased their price by 25%. They were horrified, and they didn't. They were shocked that nobody even mentioned it. And it's just because the point was that the people were using them because they trusted the people and they relied on them. So that was just one impact, just in terms of people's belief systems. And so it really is important. Sometimes we can demonstrate that. Chris, you're not coming through. It's muted. No, it's. Am
I coming through now?
Yes, that's great.
Okay. The most significant thing you've reminded me of today, Mike, is that fantastic statement that the biggest profit robber in business is discounts.
Yep.
I had a sales force way back who were obsessed with discounting. And we had to spend an awful lot of time teaching them that table that you talked about. If you have a 30% margin, a 5% discount is a 20% increase in volume. They couldn't get their heads around that. We banned the word discount like you did, and we substituted on the invoices the word adjusted by. And we charged the sales force and ourselves with coming up with a list of tradables. This is our rate card. We will adjust it by the following tradables. If you pay us in 15 days as opposed to 30 days, we will adjust our price by 1.5%. If you will take the delivery in one fell swoop as opposed to staggered over 3 months, we will adjust it by another 1.5%. And we took the sales force, we actually removed the word discounting from the parlance, and it had a huge effect on bottom line.
It can be just a mental thing, can't it, Chris? As you say, it's that getting a different attitude from the people as opposed to thinking they've got to use that thing. That's a different mindset. Yeah,
I mean, and the sales, the key word in that was tradables. Oh. Yes, we will give you an adjusted price if you do this.
Yeah, because that helps your bottom line because you're getting the money in quicker. You've got less of a credit risk, etc.
Yeah.
Yes, I always remember Derek Arden. We'll have to get him back, but one of his whole things in negotiation, again, is if I can do that for you, what can you do for me? Mm. And I think that's exactly the same, Chris.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a special thing. So you can have. So there's no one price, but there's a conditional price, but it's just never a discount.
And the other thing that really resonated with I've loved listening to you, Mike. The other thing that really resonated with me today was this thing about your critical sales drivers. I suddenly woke up to it when I listened to a guy talking and saying the problem with KPIs is they look backwards.
Yeah.
Critical success rates, CSFs, critical success failure, actually look forward. And he recounted the tale, as you did, of Continental, he did of British Airways with Lord King.
Yes.
He spent a fortune with consultants to tell him what the critical success factor was in turning around BA. And they came back with one statement: make the planes fly on time.
Yes.
And everything else falls out from that.
when we went to Australia 2 years ago, one of our friends went to the gym with the chief executive of Qantas, and so I was talking to him and I said, "Just can you ask him, because Qantas was in the situation where it was being turned around. They'd done their partnership with Emirates, and Qantas was the ugly duckling, but they were gradually turning it around." And I said, "I'm just interested to know what are the factors that he's measuring as anything." And he just said, effectively, it could have been from Gordon Battoon's book, because the key things were the 3 key areas was on-time arrival, lost luggage, but customer complaints. There was an extra one on customer, so to do with the service, they measured something else on the customer service. But there were the 4 key areas that, even in today's climate, that this guy was measuring, and said, you lose track on it because you get so trapped into the routine, and that's whereas somebody like Ryanair, he says, well, I don't care what you think, because you can't get it cheaper elsewhere. So that's but he will use a fanfare. So they added an extra half hour to their journeys, so they could always have their fanfare when they land, say, once again we've arrived on time. But they've actually allowed an extra half hour to allow them to arrive on time. But the crucial thing is, we just don't know what change we're faced with. So it's so I'm heartened, with not embarrassing Russ, but it's great when, so Russ and I, we were sitting on our veranda talking about, God, where's the next bit of business coming from? And we were talking about these difficult people negotiating, and yet then a few weeks later, Russ phoned and said, "Oh God, that one that we just got, a really difficult one, happens to be one of your friends." And when I found out who it was, and they've done an amazing job. And of course, what these difficult customers will become advocates, and will become people that Russ can use to sing the praises of Colburn and Wingrove. So it's great to see when you have success like that happening. Great. Well, hope that's given you food for thought. That's what we're trying to do. Next meeting, I'm going to see if I can get Michael Geetson to come along. I've got a couple of people who've offered to do a session in November, so bear with me, and then I'll let you know. If you've got any questions, do follow up. Let me know, and we'll share it. We'll help in any way. And
I have one question, Mike.
Yes.
Yeah, you talk about goals and purposes. What's yours?
What's our goal?
Yeah.
Well, you know what our goal is. So we, from our point of view, is to be the leading small firm in the area, and we want to grow our business. At the moment, we are 1.75 sales. We want to grow to 2 million this year. We want to grow by 250,000 sales for the next 5 years. So that's our financial goals, but our qualitative goals is to actually have being able to offer our clients and achieve a better quality of life by helping them to do the same.
Just checking.
Excellent session, Mike. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Mike. I'll see you next month.
Great.
Yeah,
take care, everybody.
Good to see you all. Bye for now.
Mike.
Thank you.